And so we're moving basically from Stacy over to Chris. Chris, if you're here, if you could just speak up so we can see you and then we
Yes,
can
I
pin
am
you.
here. Hopefully you can
Awesome.
hear me.
Yes, we can
Excellent.
hear you.
Awesome.
Um, Let me see. Pin. Can everyone see Christian now in the
Yes.
big? Okay, perfect. So, first of all, give me one little second to arrange everything so I can do a short intro. So now I'm very, very glad and it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Jin. Um, I was very happy that you said yes to join that session. We're going to
Absolutely.
have a fireside chat, and you talk about something that is extremely important. I think it's probably the most important soft skill, as we would call it. I don't think it's so soft. We're going to talk about communication, and I really wanted to include a session on communication because having worked with a lot of PhDs one-on-one, I know that this is one of the things that gets in the way, and there is no one better to talk to or talk on this topic than you, Chris, because you're a communication expert and you help mostly technical people to simplify technical language for non-technical audiences. Um, Please feel free to add anything to the intro that you feel I left out.
Absolutely. And first, thank you so much, Elena, for the invite for this session. And thank you, everybody here, for attending. It looks like we have a fantastically large audience here. To give a bit more color to me and my background, I actually come from a background in research many, many years ago. I did research in biological sciences. I was actually, before this call, looking at what I did in research to remind myself. It had to do with fluorescent proteins in human embryonic stem cells. I was trying to read the paper I wrote. I have no idea what I was saying. But I did research back in the day. I'm very familiar with the field. And then I transitioned into industry, which is what makes me particularly suited for the topic of today, which is how do you take your research expertise and translate it to fields outside of your own, especially industry, going into interviews, speaking to non-technical audiences. Since I made the pivot from research to industry, I've started my own business teaching public speaking, communication, influence skills, specifically for technical and research professionals, because that's my background. Since starting my business, I've become a TEDx speaker, an international keynote speaker, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about something I'm so passionate about. What I love to do in this session is also make it interactive, in addition to my conversation with Elena. So if anyone has any questions, please do put them in the chat. I'll make sure I weave that in to our discussion.
Perfect. Love it. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm also really looking forward to a very interactive session. I love that. So please get involved in the audience. Throw in your questions and we try to wove them in. But I want to start with one question to kind of set the stage, Chris. And why do you think these incredibly smart people with a lot of credentials struggle when it comes to getting hired, and how much do you think it comes down to the way they communicate?
Something that I struggled with when I was moving from research to industry, and also coming from, and maybe this is something many in the audience will resonate with, coming from a culture that emphasized doing good work, keeping my head down, keeping the peace, not standing out too much, being humble, to a Western workplace where a lot of those values were turned on their head. Now, suddenly, people value me being visible, speaking up, being confident, things I was very uncomfortable with. Something that I believe is the key difference between success in academia and research versus industry is a mindset shift. In research, we have an analytical mindset. We have a context based mindset. We want to be as precise as possible, give as much detail as possible. However, in industry, it's a different set of priorities. Detail and precision are important. However, what is even more important is clarity, accessibility, actionability, and the actual impact of the actions that you take. Therefore, when we communicate, we have to change our language to suit our audience. I believe Stacy just before me was alluding to very much the same. When we speak to industry, to an interviewer, we need to understand what they care about. And in industry, that is often, why does your research matter? What actions can be taken as a result of it? Reframing our communication in that light would lead to a lot more success.
I absolutely love that you also echo a lot of the things that Stacey just said, because I think really what I see a lot with PhDs, it's they want to sound smart, and what gets really lost is the clarity, right? So when in reality, making the move, it's all about, writing a CV that is clear, that shows your value, and also communicating with clarity what you can bring to a new job. So what I see a lot, and I want to kind of hear your take on it, Chris. So a lot of PhDs, they say they struggle a little bit because they feel like when they remove a lot of the details of their work and they simplify it to an extent that it doesn't really reflect anymore what they did, and they feel like it's a bit changing the not the changing the reality of what it actually was like. It feels a bit like they're dumbing it down and they feel uncomfortable with it. How do you help people in your coaching? Because I think you must have come across this too, right? Dumbing your content down and all of a sudden you feel like you're not even representing the right thing anymore.
Mhm. Absolutely. Something key in communication is for you to still feel good about how you communicate, to still feel authentic. What I teach my clients is executive presence. This is a big catch all term for many things. But here's the nuance. What executive presence is often taught as is a set of techniques and things to do. It's you move your hands a certain way, you stand a certain way, comport yourself a certain way, and suddenly you will have presence in the room that you're in. However, I want to add some more color to that definition. Executive presence is not necessarily what you do, it's how you think. If you are completely grounded in who you are, then you will communicate authentically and people will be more inclined to be confident in you. Here's the extra nuance. Executive presence is not just you feeling confident, it's do other people feel confident in you? It's not just, am I credible because I've done all this research and I have all these accomplishments, but do other people feel credible, feel that I am credible? How do you make other people feel credible in you? Here's the mindset shift I want to encourage today. Even though we as research technical professionals like to believe credibility comes from all the things we've done in our research, other people don't necessarily share that same perspective. If we understand what they care about, we can look credible in their eyes by targeting exactly that. For example, I did, let's say I did a lot of research on ChatGPT and I invented this marvelous technology. I know everything about back propagation and ReLU activation function and gradient descent, all these fancy jargony things. That's what I think is credible. However, if I'm speaking to someone from a general audience and I bring all that up, they won't think I'm credible. They'll just think I'm confusing. Instead, I reframe my communication in terms they care about. I say, I invented this magical tool that, let's say you're writing a research paper. It takes a really long time to write, to think about what to say. What if you had a tool, you just prompt it with a few questions and it can output a pretty good draft, initial draft of your research for you, and then you edit it? That would be pretty incredible, wouldn't it? And by framing things in that way, in terms that my audience cares about, I am seen as more credible. Therefore, it's not necessarily dumbing things down. It's making it more accessible to people. And by making it more accessible to people, they will think of it as more understandable.
I love that, Chris. I'm just learning. I'm very aware of how you have a very great presence. I mean, I can see, you're using your hands. No, I never do that. I'm going to start this now. But no, really, I love to learn. I'm learning so much right now. It's great. So it's really, I love what you said. We think we're credible when we talk all this language that no one understands, but if the other side doesn't really understand, they cannot perceive you as credible. They just think you're confusing. And it's really interesting because we talk about it. Hiring is a risk. A risk is a risky process. So what you do, you try to mitigate risk, right? And one way of trying to mitigate risk is when you manage to make me trust that I can do the job, which is very hard when I have no idea what you're actually talking about. So, coming to this, Chris, what do you think are the biggest mistakes or communications mistakes? Because you work with a lot of highly technical people from big tech companies, and what are the things that get in the way of most when PhDs or academics try to move into industry, what are the most common communication mistakes that you see get in their way of being successful?
Yes. And as I answer this, I'm going to weave in some questions
Okay,
that I've seen in the chat. The big theme of the questions has been I am doing research that is heavily theoretical or doesn't have an immediate impact. How do I communicate that to my audience? How do I tailor what I'm saying to the hiring managers? So I'm going to weave that into how I answer your question.
awesome.
The biggest thing that I see causing challenge for a lot of technical research professionals is just focusing on what they've done. When I coach research professionals and I have an initial interview with them to see how they communicate, how they present, what they'll often do is go through all the things they did sequentially. Oh, it's sort of like a research paper, introduction, methods, and results and discussion and conclusion. The biggest thing to remember when you're communicating is to not just talk about what's going on, but why does it matter and what action can be taken as a result of it. I want you to remember this. Think of your communication more like a newspaper rather than a research paper. In a newspaper, you put the headline up front. You say, why does this matter? You put the bottom line up front, is what it's called. By putting that front and center, saying, my research has had this benefit to this audience, or my research overcame this challenge, resulting in this impact. You make it immediately clear to people listening why they should keep listening. And this is the key thing to point out. When we're in academia, we can assume people are already interested in what we have to say because they're in our field, they're familiar. When you're speaking to people from industry, assume they do not care. They have no familiarity with your background. Your job is not only to describe what you've done, but to convince them it is worthy of their time. Therefore, don't just say what's going on, talk about why it matters and what can be done about it. Now, to address the questions, would say, how can I talk about the outcome or what can be done about it if it's theoretical? This is what I'd encourage. All of the things you've done in research have transferable skills associated with them. For example, if you've planned a huge research project, you don't only know how to do that, you can do project management very well. If you know how to do research, you're also very detail oriented. If you know how to design an experiment and interface with different stakeholders, you are good with collaboration, teamwork, communication. Even if your research doesn't have immediate impact, you gain so much from the experience of gaining a PhD. You can talk about that. All you need to do is just turn things a certain way in the way you talk about those skills. So I'll leave you with this. When you go into the interview or whoever you're talking to, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine, how can I convince them from their field and their position that I am worthy of their time? So say the what's going on, why it matters, what to do about it. Talk about the skills you learned, the general skills, not just research specific. And think about, this is based on what Stacy said as well. Based on what their company does, how can my research play a part in advancing their goals and needs?
I love what you said, Chris, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of PhDs, they look at, what have I done? When in reality, the question should be, how can I solve your problem? And this is a conversation where I can show you how I can come in and solve a problem that you're actually trying to solve, and you're hiring someone to help you solve that problem. So I really love that. So Chris, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, in our coaching, what I see is a lot of the a lot of a lot of the PhDs, they lack confidence. Really, that's,
Mm.
I think, what holds them back. Next to maybe, they go too much in depth. They're very detail oriented in the way they speak about their work. But how can you how if you do you have like 3 tips or some tips that everyone could implement right now to come across more confident? Because, right, fake it till you make it. Sometimes you just have to
Yeah.
show up. But at the end of the day, you need to believe that you can do the job. Why would I hire someone if you cannot make me believe you believe it, right? So what can I do, Chris, right now to be more confident?
I will share 3 tips, and
Okay.
then I'll give a bonus one to pull it all
Okay, of
together.
course.
So
Okay.
let's do it like this.
Okay.
First tip to remember for everyone, your audience is on your side. We often go into interviews thinking it's some kind of showdown, it's some kind of interrogation where we have to be perfect and they're trying to notice every little flaw that we're going to make and every mistake. No, the interviewer wants you to succeed just as much as you do because think about it from their perspective. If you fail, they have to interview someone else. They have to spend more time. They want you to be the one. So lean into that energy. If you're speaking to a large audience, I bet no one in that crowd wants you to fail. Otherwise, they'd be wasting their time too. So that's number one. Number two, if you make a mistake, which will inevitably happen, I can guarantee it will. I will make a mistake on this call at some point. Just keep moving forward. If you dwell on it and spend special attention on it, everyone's going to notice, yes. But if you keep moving forward, people are going to forget. Here's the cognitive bias we all experience. We think people pay much more attention to us than they actually do. The truth is, everyone's thinking about themselves. When I gave my TEDx talk, for example, I made all these mistakes on stage. I tripped over things. I crunched the microphone as I was sitting down. Nobody noticed, only I did. Number three, the physical sensation of nervousness is the exact same physical sensation as excitement. If you think about it, if you're about to go on a great grand vacation somewhere, you feel the butterflies in your stomach feeling. If you're going in an interview, you feel the same exact butterflies in your stomach feeling. The only difference is how your mind is perceiving the situation. If you're feeling negative about it, you'll feel nervous. If you're feeling positive, you'll feel excited. So just think, my body is giving me that feeling to give me energy to tackle this critical task. Let me change the way I view it. This is not just an interrogation, but an opportunity, and you can approach it better. Now, the four bonus tip, and I'll weave in another question I saw in the chat, which was if the company has a lot of NDAs and secrecy, how do I get to know how to speak the language of my audience? Here's the bonus tip to pull this all together. You can practice with AI. Go to ChatGPT, tell them, I'm about to interview with this company, with a person from this kind of role. What kind of questions do you think they'll ask me? Help me prepare some answers for that. You can gain a lot just from ChatGPT knowing the general industry and role and domain, and that will help you feel a lot more confident going in. You can also say, "Hey, I know this person has a particular title. I know that they tend to interview people from this particular industry. How can I stand out?" It can give you more tips in that sense too. So leverage AI, which is a tool we haven't had before, to feel more confident
Yeah.
for any critical event.
Sorry, Chris, give me 1 second. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think the lady is muted. I really love that, and you said something I want to dive in a little bit deeper because what we have noticed in the work that we do with PhDs, they love to be prepared. So coming back to
Mhm.
your point, be prepared. Look what they may be asking. What we have noticed is that there is, time when they become a bit too over prepared and they lose a lot of authenticity. So how can you? What would you recommend someone? Because at the end of the day, what you really want to do in an interview, you want to connect with another human being. So the last thing you want to do is come across as a robot who has, learned some questions and answers. So how can you stay authentic while also being prepared? I think that's such a tricky
Yeah.
one.
It is so hard. And the key thing to remember for all of us here is the interviewer, as was alluded to in the chat in the latest comment, they don't care so much about the laundry list of accomplishments. The biggest thing that people are looking for is, can I see myself working with you? Can I trust you? Are you someone who will collaborate? Can I see you succeed? It's the trust and the connection that are important. So how do we get there? Here's something I recommend because the question you posed, Elena, is similar to presentation. You
Mhm.
can show up with a script to a presentation and just recite it like a robot, and everybody will fall asleep. Or you can show up with no preparation whatsoever, wing it, and then completely fail. What is the sweet spot in the middle? Here's what I'd recommend. And this is a tip that applies for anyone. I recommend recording yourself. Yes, we all hate it. I hate doing it, watching yourself, listening to yourself, but it's the best way to prepare. In fact, after this recording is on YouTube, I'm going to watch myself so I can see how to improve. Each time you record yourself, practice delivering an answer to the same prompt in different ways. So let's say the interview question is, tell me about yourself. Try one version, take a minute, record yourself. Okay, that's version one. Now practice it again. Version two, no scripts, just off the cuff. The more you practice it from different angles, it's not going to come out robotically. It will come out much more naturally because you've explored it in such depth. So that's what I'd recommend.
I absolutely love this, Chris. And I have to say, I'm running a podcast and it's a video podcast. And one of the most uncomfortable things is watching yourself on screen and thinking, oh, but really, I don't think I have ever improved more than when I actually started doing this. It may be uncomfortable, but it really helps you to understand what are the things that I constantly do and how do they actually come across on the other end. So I absolutely love that tip. So, Chris, we have like 5 more minutes left. I wonder if we
Okay.
want to jump in and pick some questions from the audience. If
Sure.
you
Yeah.
see something that you think would be particularly helpful or that you feel this is something that you come across in your work too and it would be helpful for many in the audience, please pick what you would like to address.
Absolutely. Let me look through the chat and please do post more questions if you have them as I look through. Axel, I do see your question about a vibe check. I don't know if I completely understand it. Could you elaborate on what you mean or come off mute if you feel comfortable? From what I understand, it's that if someone is neurodivergent, their style may not match what the interviewer is looking for. Is that your question or was it slightly different? And as you answer, either in the chat or out loud, I'll look at some other questions. Indu asks, what is the best way or platform where anyone can practice or prepare to tell technical things in a behavioral way? So, what I think I gather from this question is how can you practice communication and get good feedback on it? That's the key. So, recording yourself, sure, anyone can do that, but how do you know if you're doing a good job? Here's one way, and this requires no coach. You can take the video you've recorded. You could even upload it to YouTube, just your own private channel. You get a transcript from that, from YouTube automatically generated. Upload that transcript to ChatGPT and ask it, hey, how did I do? What are some holes in the way I told that story? What's some way I could improve? That's a great way to get feedback without necessarily needing to speak with a human being if you're not as comfortable yet. Let's see. Oh, a lot of other questions. Let's see. When someone asks a mistake, lesson learned behavioral question, how big of a mistake do we use? Okay, here's a mistake that I made in my behavioral interview question. The interviewer asked me, tell me your greatest weakness. Hate that question. And here's what I said. I said,